We are Muskegon County at Work, spotlighting workers of local governments throughout our county, revealing what it takes to make our communities comfortable and safe. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Muskegon County Municipalities at Work. Your host here, DJ Hilson. And again, this is where we get a chance to really dive a little bit deeper into local government, whether it be at the municipal, county, or state level, and give you all a little, I guess, a look behind the curtain, if you will, as to how particular departments work, why they're important for the everyday living of us as citizens, and again, giving you an opportunity to appreciate those that have dedicated their lives to this kind of public service. And today, I have a true public servant with me, Jake Eckholm. Welcome, Jake.
Thank you. Yeah, glad to be here.
As I always like to do in the first part of the conversation is talk a little bit about yourself. You know, who you are, how you came to be where you're at, and what you do.
Sure. Public servants notoriously aren't very good about talking about ourselves,
but
we'll do our best.
Yes.
So, again, Jake Eckholm. I work for the city of Muskegon. I have for going on 7 years, and born and raised in Muskegon, and graduate of Orchard View High School, and then associates at Muskegon Community College, and then transferred over to Grand Valley for my bachelor's in political science, thinking I was going to go to law school and be sitting across the aisle from you as either a defense attorney or a civil rights and disability advocacy attorney. And so that was always my plan because I wanted to be in Muskegon. I have a little bit of a unique background in that it's just my mom and I, and she has what's known as a traumatic brain injury. Highly recovered now, a great success story. But at the time, I was her caregiver for a long time as a kid. And then I'm sure a lot of us out here listening to the podcast can relate. A lot of my family members were not from Muskegon County. And what I noticed as a kid and a teen, didn't always have the nicest things to say about the Muskegon area. And I really found that troubling because, like, given the fact that, we didn't have a car and we were of limited means because of my mom's injury, like, people really gathered around us, and I had a really good childhood and a good upbringing and enjoyed the community. And so I was always like, all right, whatever I do, I'm going to do it in Muskegon. And, advocacy was big for me at the time. Got a little sticker shock towards the end of undergrad for law school. Yeah. And opted for grad school at Grand Valley and got my master's in public administration instead, and was fortunate to start my career in city management at the age of 24 and commuted to Montcalm County and managed a couple communities there at the same time, which was a unique and unusual challenge. And then my dream job was the city of Muskegon Heights, and I really wanted to be a part of change and, getting people to see the quality in that community because I worked and many people remember at the Old Country Buffet on Sherman Boulevard, which is now an urgent care. And a lot of my friends in that job were from Muskegon Heights, and I would take them home with my, in high school I had a car, and so I'd be the guy to drive people. And I was always like, man, I don't understand why people are so afraid of this place and why people act like it's such a bad place. And so I always wanted to work there and was fortunate to do that for a few years. And ever since, I've been with the city of Muskegon. So that was a mouthful, but
no, I mean, I quite frankly, I always like listening to people's story and then the why. And as much as I would have loved to have you in the legal profession, I'm so grateful that you're actually where you're at. Again, you and I have kind of known each other for quite a few years, and certainly I think it does take, and this, I guess, this is leading to my question, the visionary part of what you have done in your career, starting from Muskegon Heights and now working for the city of Muskegon. What about vision plays such an important role in what you do for government?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so I picked this up along the way somewhere, but for a long time, I always say this to like the staff and the community members that we work with, we should be asking ourselves 3 questions before we do anything, like, where are we trying to go? How are we going to get there? And what is that going to take? And so I think that really is a summation of vision. Like, you have to understand the outcome you're trying to achieve. And that takes a ton of community engagement, and you're never going to get unanimity on that. It's a diverse community of many people and many interests. And so, you have to rely on data and best practice. That's all true. But you really have to understand, like, this is the outcome that will serve the interests of the community that I'm working for. And keeping that top of mind for the staff and myself is important, and making sure like, hey, like, what is the outcome that you're working for here? When we have points of frustration, that's usually what I come back to with folks is like, what are we trying to accomplish and why, and how are we trying to get there? And usually if you can answer those questions, it's a much smoother process, and usually you get a lot more buy-in from the community as well.
Yeah, I mean, those are, I think, really excellent points because, again, as you know, especially when you're either coming up with some goals or some projects, and you work towards getting to that end, you can get sidetracked. I mean, it happens. Yep. But to keep in mind this is where we want to go and this is the why, helps you bring you back to focus in on where your energy should be. For sure. That
the why, or like what are we? You'll hear me ask it a lot, like in meetings and stuff. Like, what are we doing here? And it's usually because I can feel the conversation creeping away from like the purpose that we're there, which is to deliver public services, right? And that can look like a lot of things. For our division, it looks like, rebuilding the community. And I tell people all the time, I feel fortunate. I remember being a little kid and walking through the Muskegon Mall and, seeing Chris Moose and all that good stuff. And it left a lot of blank spaces. And, even beyond downtown, I tell the economic development staff in our division, like, our job, we have this unique opportunity to like fill in these blank spaces, and we can only do it once. And so we have to be very deliberate and intentional, and we really need to bring people in that, live and utilize these corridors to understand what their needs are. And I feel like we're making a lot of great progress, and it's with the help of everybody in City Hall, in the neighborhoods, and we're kind of part of this generational thing, which hopefully is a sustainable development of our community, right? We've had the lumber era, we've had the industrial era, and now we have this, and then we have like the attempt at like being this regional retail hub. We're fortunate that our economy is much more diversified and much more regional. And so we have this opportunity to kind of build this thing that could stick. And so I feel very fortunate to be in that role, and that why keeps coming back to me.
So, I guess the one thing that I sort of overlooked, and I want to make sure that we mention, what do you do for the city?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, usually I lead with that, so that's my mistake.
No, that's okay.
So, my role is the Director of Development Services. So the way the city is structured, we have 4 divisions of government. 3 of them are the ones everyone's heard of: public safety, finance, and then public works. And then the 4th division, the one I oversee, is development services. It includes economic development and its staff, planning and zoning, so land use, and then community and neighborhood services, which is really focused on housing preservation for our most vulnerable families with federal dollars from community development block grants, as well as the home program. And then we have lots of, the staff is so adept at achieving other dollars. So we've had DTE Foundation and Healthy Homes and Senior Millage and all these other great things. So we're really focused on anything that is going to have to do with land use, what you put on it, and how you build it.
So I know that you have been, because I've seen you as part of presentations as it relates to housing here in Muskegon County. Talk a little bit about why all of a sudden, I would say all of a sudden, but it now has become a bigger priority than a lot of things, only because of, I'll say, success.
Well, I think part of my position description is to like create and implement an economic development strategy for the community. And really, several years ago, I think we kind of came to this realization, like, housing is economic development, and we were hearing it as soon as I started in 2019. I was getting a lot of feedback from like landlords that I had worked with in Muskegon Heights, and renters and people I knew in the community, employers, that, hey, there's a lot of upward pressure, especially in the rental market. And so we started investigating that a little bit. And I think to this day, I feel fortunate that people gave me that feedback because I think we got ahead of the problem by a year or so related to some other communities. I mean, in the whole country. Mm-hmm. And because now it's all everybody talks about. When I go to any sort of training or conference, it's housing focused. If you look at where the state budget that they're working on right now has a huge housing focus. But, what we discovered pretty quickly is there's a demand because of the regionalization of the economy. So it's housing here is 2/3 of the price of Kent County and Ottawa County. More and more people are being priced out of those markets, and they're finding it is worthwhile to live here, commute there, or live here and work remotely. And then we're seeing some growth in our communities, which is great. So the challenge that comes with that is, we as the city of Muskegon, we have a higher cohort of like working class people, working wage people. That's always historically been the case. And they're the first people to struggle when, interest rate environments go up or when rent goes up. And so that's been our focus from an economic development standpoint for the last several years is basically if we can achieve stable housing. And I always kind of beat it into everybody's head, like, housing at every price point in every area. That's what we want. So if you are a high income earner, but you have a lot of family, in the center of the city or on the east side of the city and you want to live there, there should be housing that you want. If you're a low wage, moderate wage household and you want to live on the west side of the city, we want to create an environment where that is the case. And so that's what we're working towards.
Which I think is, it sounds novel, but in the same sense, it just seems like that's the way it should be, right? You shouldn't have these different neighborhoods, if you will, that only the high-income folks are going to be here, and we're not mixing in with everybody else and giving everybody the same opportunities to, be close to the lake or close to a particular park or whatever the case is.
Yeah, I think that's really it in a nutshell, and it's challenging, right? Because it's a free market real estate economy, and that's the system, and that's the game. That's the field we're playing the game on. And so, some of our strategies. And then the other thing is, a lot of the areas where we have opportunity for growth in neighborhoods are the neighborhoods that have been the most divested. So, neighborhoods where there's been a lot of houses that have gone vacant and have eventually been removed. The more stable the neighborhood, the less that has happened, and therefore the less opportunity we have to impact the housing market there. And so, it's certainly not a perfect system, but we're really heavily focused on making sure that there's a large increase to multifamily housing in the city, that we're, a leader, which we are in the Midwest really for city-sponsored or city-initiated infill housing in our neighborhoods, single-family, duplex, triplex. And so, that's been great. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback from it, and we're actually conducting a survey right now of folks who have bought those houses to kind of steer our next direction. So.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that, because I guarantee you people watching this podcast or listening to it have driven by some recent developments and maybe not even recognize that was all city run. And I'm talking about, at the end of, is it the end of Muskegon or Webster?
Webster, yeah.
End of Webster. And then there's a neighborhood, there's a couple of houses in the, I want to say Nelson neighborhood, right?
Oh, there's a lot, yeah.
So talk a little bit about that, because those were all city-driven projects,
they were,
if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and a lot of credit to our previous city manager and our existing team that certainly predated my role in this kind of stuff. So a lot of this stuff started as like, hey, we need to prove that there can be a housing market here, because there was really no new construction market. And that's kind of how it started. So those Webster houses, those are like market rate rental houses. It was like, hey, we need to provide opportunities for people to live close to these amenities. And then in the neighborhoods, we started in Nelson. I think the philosophy has for a long time in the city, like you got to start in that center and build your way out. And now, that has been quite successful. And now you see us building our way out. So our most recent builds, McLaughlin neighborhood, Jackson Hill, Marquette, Campbell Field, neighborhoods that people don't traditionally think of when they're thinking about redevelopment. And what we really always wanted to do is we wanted to make sure that we were cultivating a market. And so from 2018 to 2023, it was the last time we looked at the data, we accounted for 60% of all the single-family new construction housing in the city. If you looked at the other 40%, it was very much like waterfront development, things like that, or like these one-off large lots that people got a hold of and built a nice house on, which is great. All power to them. And really, at 2022, 2023 is when we were like, hey, we need to understand the data behind this problem. And that's when we did our 5-year housing needs assessment, and it shocked us. We knew we had a problem. What we found was, at the time of the study, we had about 14,700 total housing units in the city limits. and it showed a shortage of 2,924 units over 5 years. And that's effectively a more than 20% increase to the housing stock to keep pace with all the needs. And it showed some really stark things. Like, we needed hundreds of units at any price point, both rental and owner occupied. So if DJ comes to me and says, hey, I want to build $500,000 condos, we had a market for that. We're like, okay, how can we help you? If, Mr. Vogus comes to me and says, I figured out a way to build rental housing for, under $600 a month, I'm going to be like, we have a market for that. How can we help you? And so that's been something that has taken a lot of education. We've had a lot of residents be like, we don't need these, houses. People here can't afford these. But there's been a lot of institutional barriers to success in the Muskegon real estate market. I always pick on myself. When I was 22 or 23, my then girlfriend, now wife, and I bought our first house in Nim's neighborhood, 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, around 2,000 square feet, all remodeled. Bought it for $52,000, which everybody outside of Muskegon is like, that's insane. When I tell, my aunt or my mom or my grandma, they're like, like this, it's not shocking. And then, 9 years later, when we needed a larger house because of more kids and, her job being made remote, we sold it for just under $200,000. And the couple that was buying it from us were from Muskegon, and they were coming back from Metro Detroit. And they had sold their house for high 3s, low 4s in that area. And they were kind of like, we feel like we're stealing this house from you. And I had to be like, well, don't feel too bad. And so there's been this interesting factor in our market specifically where, because of, institutionally discriminatory policies in banking and finance and real estate, how public education is funded, all these things have depressed the housing market in Muskegon for decades. And so, it used to be you bought a house in 1980 for $50,000, and in 2013 it was worth $50,000. And that's part of the reason that we have a large cohort of low to moderate income people, is because they've had an inability to build equity in the neighborhoods they live in. And so what we're seeing is that is changing. And so now, we think, the most affordable site-built, stick-built houses in the country. We build a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom unit. I think it's around 672 square feet or something like that. And we build that and then market it for $129,900. We take a targeted loss on that. You can't find a $130,000 new construction house anywhere else in the country. And if you can, let me know, because I've tried. And but people see that $130,000 price tag and they're still like, people can't afford that. That's too expensive, because we became accustomed to this really depressed market. But the other side of that is that's what kept so many families from being able to achieve generational wealth. So. Yeah,
it is to me, it's just truly amazing. And I'm not a lifelong resident, but I've been here, almost 27, 28 years. And so I've seen some of that change happening, all for the good. And like you said, I mean, the perception has always been, well, why would you want to live in Muskegon? Why would you want to work in Muskegon? It's this, it's that. And all the while, for me, it's like, man, you guys got it good here. I don't know. I mean, it truly is. And so to see now sort of that vision sort of being uncapped.
Yeah, less well-kept secret at this point.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Do you, I guess, as we kind of look into the future, do you see, do you see this continual growth happening and all sort of the excitement and the buzz that's going on right now continuing to expand and go?
So I think the short and simple answer is probably. We are not immune to market forces. Sure. The name of the game right now is uncertainty in the macro economy. One thing I think that a lot of credit is owed to, everybody in the region that works in these spaces is we have a much more diversified economy than we've ever had. And so, you look at the employment data and it's pretty evenly split between manufacturing and healthcare. You got a pretty good services industry. The ability to work remotely is huge. And so, we're not going to lose one employer and have a significant percentage of the population become unemployed. And so that used to be a huge Achilles heel for a lot of West Michigan communities, a lot of Rust Belt Midwestern communities. So that's good. The housing market is still hotter than it probably should be, and those interest rates are slowly but surely kind of doing their work. I anticipate that it's going to stay effectively status quo. There will be a market for our houses for the foreseeable future. We had over 200 some odd lots when I started really getting involved in this stuff directly, and I think we're down to 60 something. The rest and that's really a key part of our program. Is what we did is really did what the previous administration wanted to do, is prove, hey, you can have a housing market here for new construction. And so now what we're doing is marketing those lots to incremental developers. Like we'll work with anybody. We have a really nice deal that we just did with Allen Edwin, which is one of the largest home builders in the state. But more often what we're seeing is we find people and cultivate them like, hey, build me 1, build me 2, build me 4. And we have a lot of those folks. We recently did some really best practice cutting edge zoning reforms to allow more housing choice, more duplexes, a use by right, more accessory dwelling units, or mother-in-law suites as they call them. And we're seeing people actually take advantage of that. And we're in at least one situation where we could have gotten a total of 12 houses, we're going to get a total of 30 some odd housing units.
Wow.
And that helps us with that 3,000 unit shortage, because we literally don't have the vacant lots to build our way out of that unless we make those changes. So you continue to see that housing as economic development. If you provide stable living spaces for people to be successful, then they have that opportunity. It's this housing first idea. Like, if people have the opportunity to be housed, they usually figure everything else out.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree. Stable housing sort of sets the stage for everything else. Let's flip the script a little bit and have you talk a little bit about the business development. I mean, on top of the housing, I mean, certainly housing shortage is I would assume is an indicator that business is developing because more people are coming here to work and need or finding jobs and need a place to kind of lay down at night. So talk to me about the business development that you've been a part of here. Certainly,
yeah. I really that's always always been a fun part of the job for me. Even before, when I was the city manager in other communities, that was always one of my favorite things. Is not just attraction projects and getting new businesses to invest, but to help the ones that are here incubate and expand. And so there's this 80-20 rule in the economic development game, saying like you should spend 80% of your time focused on your existing business base. And I think that's what's happening in Muskegon. We're seeing expansion projects, a couple of recent ones, Northern Biomedical Research, which was a controversial project. They do preclinical trial testing for the medical industry. And they built a massive, 150 some odd thousand square foot laboratory in our industrial park. And then our latest expansion is a 215,000 square foot new construction for forming technologies, which they're a long-standing Muskegon business, and they received some new contracts from the federal government for the Postal Service, and suddenly outgrew their space. And our economic development staff and our deal team, as I call it, which is myself and some other folks in my division, and we bring in Public Works and the Fire Marshal, and we have these one-stop shop meetings, and got them to invest in the city limits. And those are always great, and it's always cool to see the buildings going up, but then you get to meet some of the people that are going to work there. Those are hundreds and hundreds of new jobs in the city limits, and that's phenomenal. And a lot of great things are happening, not just in the city, but in our neighbors, Norton Shores, Roosevelt Park, North Muskegon, Muskegon Heights. I think the whole metro area is seeing a lot of vested entrepreneurialism. We have a recent one, and you won't think of these as these huge home runs that people are always looking for, but it's really where the growth happens. There was a recent former Great Lakes diecast building on Henry was purchased and renovated into an auto garage, like a mechanic and auto body shop. And that's an entrepreneur that's like, I'm going to take a risk. I'm going to take this building that was used for something else, and I'm going to plant my flag here. And I love watching those where they were empty. Some of them have been empty since I was a kid. Mm-hmm. And you see people be like, I can imagine what can go here. And so our job is to support that. I always tell the staff and the community, our job is not to make people successful. Our job is to create an environment where they can be successful. And I think with business development, you're seeing that entrepreneurial culture really take off in our community. And so we've made investments in staffing on the economic development side specifically to move beyond downtown, right? Move beyond downtown and the industrial park. And so we have 2 full-time economic development analysts, and they split all of our commercial corridors in the city between themselves, and their job is to be that champion for all those entrepreneurs and business owners and employers in those corridors. So I think one of the things that people need to understand who are listening to this, who are thinking about, man, I really want to start X business, but I don't know how to go about it or where I should go. Clearly,
the city of Muskegon has built into its government infrastructure the ability to start having those conversations and even helping look for and develop space.
Oh yeah, that was very intentional and deliberate on our part. So when I started as the economic development director, which was like a department head level position, but it was a one-man show. And so it was like, go out and do retention visits and figure out what's going on the ground. And over the course of time, we realized like, hey, we need to make some investments to handle this workload, because if we do our job right, it's going to continue to, by orders of magnitude, get more and more demanding. And that's exactly what has happened. So it was me, and then we started with another development analyst, and then we created that position and then very quickly filled their plate and then hired the second. And now, they're both working a lot of hours to help these folks. And so, if there are people that have an idea or they have interested in development or interested in business, then really the role of that analyst is to be that person's champion and help them understand what all the resources that are out there, what the needs are. It used to break my heart, especially in Muskegon Heights, but every stop I've been in, I would have like open door policy. Like if I don't have an appointment and I'm in my office working and somebody comes to the door, I'll talk to you. And what do you need? And often it would be, I have this idea for this business, and like I make this food, or I do this product, and I do it online right now, and I really want to do a brick and mortar. I'm like, oh, okay. Like, have you done a business plan? Do you have a location in mind? Yeah, I have this building. It's been vacant for 15 years, and I bought it, on tax foreclosure. I inherited it, and like not having like a clear understanding of what it was going to take. And it goes back to those three questions. And I would share those questions, like, where are you trying to go? How are you going to get there? What is it going to take? And a lot of times, like, they just didn't have that network of people around them through their family or their colleagues to like, hey man, like you need to talk to a lender and you need to get a commercial contractor, and the commercial contract code is different than your house. You can't do these things the same way. You can't sell this food unlicensed out of these places. And so a lot of stuff, people had these great entrepreneurial spirits, great products in many cases, but they were missing that network of resources or anybody to show it to them. And so that's really where the inspiration for that development analyst job came from, was all those conversations I've had over the last 12 years with people who had great ideas, but I didn't have like the bandwidth to get them where they needed to be.
Well, and I really think that's fantastic, because, not everybody can come in with a big bunch of capital, and they need to start small. And to me, that's why those chalets along Western Avenue are so great, because it gives you that business opportunity. And personally, Morat's Bakery went from a chalet to a huge brick and mortar store, and so to foster that, I think is really, really cool. That I don't think you see in other communities.
It's been often replicated at this point, which we love. Like, so we've had folks from Michigan, out of state, chambers of commerce from other communities, like, hey, we want to see these. We saw them in this publication or that publication. And a lot of credit is owed to the clerk's office at the city of Muskegon. A lot of people don't know this, but it was actually the city clerk's office that has run those for a long time. And it's this year was the first year we in the economic development department took those on. And so my development analysts worked together to run and operate that thing. And it's a great committee of people that choose the vendors. We had great vendors this year all the way around. If you haven't gone, you have to go. There's folks that we are very confident will move to a storefront, like you've said. And that's with the economic development department taking it on, we want to make it even more robust as an accelerator and incubator space. So trying to provide more trainings and resources and information to those folks who are interested in taking that step. And we think we have several that want to and have great potential to do so. And so it'll continue to be that incubation space at the Western market.
I just think it's awesome.
Yeah.
And now I want you to kind of explain a little bit the development of the lakeshore. And I'm trying to keep this as non-controversial as possible. Sure. But certainly, I at least since I've been here, that has always been sort of a vision that, we take advantage of the lakeshore as much as possible and give that advantage to the citizens and people that come to visit.
Certainly.
And starting from the old sappy paper plant and moving all the way through into, where Heritage Landing is in MarkDOT, there seems to be a real vision as to how that can look and how that'll benefit the community at large. Can you Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So I think like the lakefront development goes right back to what I said. Like we have one chance to do this, right? And so a lot of the spaces we're building on right now are either foundry fill or lumber fill. A lot of people don't know, like 300 acres plus minus has been taken away from the lake over time and filled in. And a lot of these development sites you referenced are those spaces. And so one of the big changes that we've made, in the last decade that will set us apart from previous generations of development along the lake is any like planned unit development along these lakefront sites, which almost all of them have to be just because of their size, require a significant amount, in most cases 50% of the waterfront access to be accessible to the public. And so that's a huge change and a benefit. Even the ones that haven't, we as staff have been had some really thorough negotiations with developers who have, by and large, been good to work with in that case about public access. Like, hey, the way you've drafted this plan, I'm not going to take it to the Planning Commission because it's not representative of what is in the Imagine Muskegon Lake Plan. It's not representative of what's in the Community Master Plan. We need to get closer to that mark. And then, there's room for compromise, but we have to get closer to that mark. And the developers in these cases, to their credit, in most every case have worked with us on that. So, I'll point out Harbor 31 as a good example. That's the one that has Trilogy Senior Housing, and it's got Viridian Shores. The Element by Marriott Hotel is approved for that site. And so it's had this boardwalk for going on 20 years, I think. And that's a public boardwalk, but there was no technical easements across the lot to get to it. So it's a public boardwalk that is required to be public access, but for whatever reason, before my time, nobody had ever put these easements in, and we caught that in the PUD, and sure enough, the developer's like, oh yeah, that's totally reasonable, and grants us these easements, and the plan calls for these sidewalks from parking to get out there. And so in every case, and there's always some level of controversy on these because this lake is a public trust. It's a body of water we all enjoy. The thing I try to gently remind folks is none of these spaces in question were public. When it comes to whether it's Adelaide Point, Harbor 31, the Sappy site, these were always private and in most cases either lumber or industrial, and were very unwelcoming to parks and people. So these new access points that'll be created at all of these developments did not exist before, and I think they're going to be a net benefit to the public's enjoyment. And I, as somebody who lived in NIMS for 9 years and lives in Nelson right downtown now, and with small kids, I use the ones that have been created, and I'll use the new ones as they pop up along the bike trail. One of the coolest things I'm excited about with the Sappy paper mill plan, or the Sappy redevelopment plan, the PUD that was approved last year, is it moves the bike path, the Lakeshore Trail, off the road. That whole section in front of Sappy is a bike lane in the road. And I have, 3 daughters, 8, 6, and 3, and we're pulling them in a burly, and we're all riding together, and I'm excited to move that bike trail off the road. So those net benefits to the public as this redevelopment comes. If there is a profit to be made, redevelopment in a market economy will happen. And so the question becomes, how do we do that sustainably and equitably? And that's what we always say is we have to do this without it coming at the expense of the people that are already here.
Well, and I think people need to recognize, as you've said more than once, that the city, I'll include leadership and certainly your department as well. You're not going in this blindly. You're not going this forgetting about the community. Mm-hmm. In fact, it's almost the opposite. It's we're going to make sure the community has every benefit and access, so that it's not a private thing where I've got to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars just to have access to the lake. That's not the case.
No, and really won't be while this commission and this manager and me as division head here are here. That's not the intention. It's the opposite, as you said. So I often end up being sort of like the deal guy. I'll be working with, whether it's Parkland with the Shaw or, Leastma Management for Adelaide Point. It's, okay, how do we sit down and come up with something that can pencil for you because it's a profit-making enterprise developing these properties, but can provide public services and enjoyment for everyone, not just the people who can afford a condo or an apartment or can frequent your businesses. And I think by and large, that's been successful, not without controversy, to your point, and certainly not everyone watching this will agree with me that it's been successful. But when you know the ins and outs of the documents and what is required, and what existed there before and what wasn't there for the public before, I think when we look at it, we feel like we're achieving that for the community.
Well, listen, Jake. I mean, I've always admired your work from afar. I mean, you certainly are an expert in your field. And again, I'll go back to my original point. As much as I'd love to have you as a lawyer, thank you for what you're doing now.
Well,
truly, I mean, I think, as you indicated, even prior to you, we had visionaries come at the right moment, at the right time, and started the ball rolling.
Mm-hmm.
And that ball is continuing to roll to the betterment of those of us that live, work, and play in this community, but also to, again, kind of really start to rough up or shine up that rough diamond that we've appreciated,
yeah,
and that nobody else has. So thank you for that. I have one last question for you. This is
Sure.
true lawyer, man. One last question.
Sure.
It may go to two. You've been a lifelong Muskegon resident. What has been one of the most significant things that you've seen from your young life until now that has really made a difference here in Muskegon County?
Oh, I think that's a really good question. So I think about, this is going to be an interesting one in my answer. I hope people agree, but I think about like the food scene. So like think about, and I was a kid when like, as an example, the Lakes Mall, I remember when it opened, it was like, oh, we're getting a Red Robin and we're getting an Olive Garden, we're getting all these great things. And people still enjoy those things, but we were so excited to get like chain restaurants. And now 95% of the times that I go out with my family or my friends and their kids, it's to local restaurants. And I think about that. We had our staples, like when I was an East Muskegon guy, so we went to Village Inn and someplace else pizza and Bo Nicky's when I was in my early 20s. And that was like an OV class reunion every Monday with like dollar beers and free pool. But like some of those places have segued, but like, the actual sit down dinner places, the options and the quality have gotten so much better. And quite frankly, I've traveled a lot of places, are still very cost competitive relative to other places. And I think that has been a really nice benefit that this development has brought to everyone, right? Because those places aren't just for people on vacation. All of us get to enjoy them. And I think about how little there was downtown specifically, or in like, as an example, like the Laketon corridor and places like that. When Flamingos went out of business, like that was like, there should have been a funeral. Like people were that upset. And now you're just seeing all this new entrepreneurialism, and they're mostly local folks, and they're taking that risk in a really difficult industry. So I think that is maybe an unconventional answer, but I think it's a real kind of bellwether for how the overall local economy is doing. You're not only relying on, outlots for big department stores and the malls and stuff. You're really seeing like corridor level investment in that food scene. And that's a real indicator that things are going well when that happens.
Yeah, that's, I didn't expect that from you, but as I've listened to that, yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think about my own experience, and I would much rather visit somebody local than worry about going to a chain restaurant. And the diversity and the quality is really fantastic.
Yeah, and the offerings, like it's so much more eclectic than it was, and I think that's great. And then I'm going to do a two-part answer. So the other thing that I think I need to make sure I mention is like the wider focus on affordable housing. And so there's historically been, Muskegon and Muskegon Heights have been the communities that have been open-minded to it, but it's now a key component of our economic development strategy. And actually, in the last, I think, 3 rounds of what's called LIHTC, or Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Apartment Complex, it's like a competitive process in the state of Michigan. We've received 6 awards with partner developers, and I believe we're second in the state of Michigan behind only the city of Detroit, second or third. And so really like punching out of our weight class, and that has delivered almost 300 apartment units that are in production right now for their working families or senior citizens. People hear low-income housing tax credit and they really have these negative connotations, but in reality, they're people that are, 40 to 50 grand a year people, or they're senior citizens. And those are the folks that the study shows need that housing. And so I think that intervention has been, in my time working, like the biggest positive catalyst I've seen. We're seeing all kinds of market rate housing too, and that's needed. But those folks are going to find their feet. The folks that are really at risk of being housing endangered. And they're people we wouldn't expect. Like I said, they're people making $25 an hour. And you know, the unhoused situation today doesn't look like it did 10 years ago. It's much less visible. It's much more people couch surfing, living in their vehicle a lot of the time, living in, you know, in temporary situations. And so the more we can undergird those folks, the better the overall local economy will be. And so I think that is probably a little bit heavier answer than the food scene, but from a career standpoint, that's one of the things I'm most proud of is the fact we have been so successful in learning that very complicated system and working with those developers. And you're seeing it's right now on Apple Avenue. I'm sure people have seen all the buildings under construction by Benson's. And then we recently got awarded Frebel School, which was a city-owned vacant elementary school, Spanish mission architecture. We couldn't get anybody market rate to do anything with it. I've probably taken years off my life walking through that school with you know, its questionable environmental status, but we walked probably 12 developers through it, and finally Samaritas, a nonprofit housing organization, worked with us and we got awarded. And so that'll be 46 apartments in Jackson Hill. Nelson School, only recently taken offline by the Muskegon Public Schools. We worked with General Capital and got that one awarded. And then a lot of people might know the former McDonald's on Muskegon Avenue right across from City Hall. That's gone, and there's a big elevator shaft there now for a 4-story apartment building there. All those are, they're not like voucher-based like public housing the way people imagine affordable housing. They are effectively just a different way to finance an apartment. And in exchange for getting the available tax credit to finance that apartment, you have to keep the rents at what MSHDA says you have to keep them at. And that's great for like the working families that we have in the community that really fill that income bracket.
Well, listen, Jake, again, thank you for choosing public service, first and foremost. Thank you for staying local, keeping your talents local. I really appreciate your heart for wanting to make a difference here. And I will say as one person that you have. So thank you for that.
Right back at you, DJ. I have always followed your career and your public service in Muskegon County, and I have an aunt that was a legal secretary in the prosecutor's office before your time, and then other private law offices, and so that always kept me interested. And I've always just really found you to be a straight shooter and a great public servant. So,
well, thank you. I appreciate that very much. Your check's in the mail, by the way.
I'll send the invoice.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, this ends another great episode. I hope that you take some time to really digest what this conversation was all about. In particular, I want to highlight not only the great things that are happening within the city of Muskegon from a business and housing development, but for you entrepreneurs out there who are scratching ideas on napkins or on pieces of paper, and you're looking for, the next step as to where you go next, stop by the city of Muskegon. They got folks that'll help you. As always, this program does not happen without the ingenuity of one Michael Vogus.